Wren's eyes widened as the pregnancy test displayed a positive result for the 32nd time in just 7 Earth days. The Kazon scientist, sent to make first contact with humanity, never imagined her mission would take such an unexpected turn. It all began when the Kazon, an alien race plagued by critically low fertility rates, stumbled upon Earth during their search for habitable planets. Desperate to solve their species' reproductive crisis, the Kazon leadership selected Wren, their top xenobiologist, to initiate contact and study human biology. Upon her arrival, Wren met Douglas Morgan, a human biologist assigned to study her in return. Their first encounter revealed stark differences between their species. Wren explained that Kazon females typically struggled for years to conceive a single offspring, while Douglas shared that human reproduction was far more efficient. Intrigued by this revelation, Wren requested to study human reproductive methods, hoping to find a solution to her species' impending extinction. Her request sparked a flurry of activity among Earth's leaders. The United Nations hastily convened a secret meeting to debate the potential consequences of sharing such knowledge with the Kazon. Some officials argued that cooperation could lead to a strategic alliance, potentially ushering in a new era of interstellar relations. Others, however, voiced concerns that Earth might be overrun by rapidly reproducing aliens if the Kazon gained access to this information. As global leaders deliberated, Wren began experiencing unusual physical changes. Her body seemed to be adapting to Earth's environment in unexpected ways. Douglas, noticing these changes, grew concerned about potential health risks to his alien guest. He proposed a series of tests to monitor her condition, unaware that these changes were the precursor to a dramatic increase in Wren's fertility. News of the alien visitor spread like wildfire, igniting anti-alien sentiment across the globe. Protesters took to the streets in major cities worldwide, demanding Wren's immediate departure. Fearing attacks by extremist groups, the military mobilized to protect the research facility where Wren and Douglas worked. Caught between his duty and his conscience, Douglas received orders from his superiors to limit the information he shared with Wren about human reproduction. Citing national security concerns, they insisted on keeping certain aspects of human biology classified. Douglas struggled with this directive, believing that the knowledge could be crucial for the Kazon's survival. Wren, perceptive and intelligent, sensed Douglas's hesitation. Suspicion took root in her mind, driving her to secretly gather data on her own. She discovered Earth's internet and began researching human reproduction independently, without the knowledge or consent of her handlers. As tensions escalated both on a personal and global scale, Douglas realized that the next 7 days would be critical in determining the future relationship between humans and the Kazon. The fate of both species hung in the balance, with potential outcomes ranging from a groundbreaking alliance to interstellar conflict. Little did anyone know that Wren's body was already undergoing a transformation that would challenge everything they thought they knew about Kazon biology. The next week would reveal whether this unexpected development would bring the two species closer together or drive them apart forever. As the sun rose on the 3rd day of Wren's visit to Earth, the research facility hummed with nervous energy. Wren's body tingled with unfamiliar sensations, her abdomen swollen and tender. She pressed a hand against her midsection, feeling the rapid fluttering beneath her skin. Douglas entered the lab, his brow furrowed with concern. "Good morning, Wren. How are you feeling today?" Wren forced a smile, hiding her discomfort. "I'm fine, Douglas, just eager to continue our work." Douglas hesitated, then pulled up a chair beside her. "Listen, Wren, I know I haven't been entirely forthcoming with information about human reproduction. I'd like to rectify that, at least partially." Wren's antenna perked up, her large eyes widening with interest. Douglas proceeded to explain the basics of human reproduction, careful to keep his explanations simple and clinical. "Humans typically release 1 egg per month during ovulation," he explained. "Gestation lasts about 9 months, which is considerably shorter than the Kazon's 3-year pregnancy cycle." Wren listened intently, her mind racing with possibilities. "Fascinating," she murmured. "The efficiency of your reproductive system is remarkable." As Douglas spoke, Wren felt a sudden sharp pain in her abdomen. She winced, quickly masking her discomfort. Unbeknownst to both of them, Her body was undergoing a radical transformation, her ovaries swelling and producing hundreds of eggs at an unprecedented rate. Outside the facility, the streets teemed with protesters, signs bearing slogans like "Humans First" and "No Aliens on Earth" bobbed above the angry crowd. Among them, Jack Hawkins, leader of the Earth First Coalition, surveyed the scene with grim satisfaction. Hawkins tapped his earpiece. "Team Alpha, what's your status?" A gruff voice responded, "In position, sir, awaiting your command." Inside the facility, Dr. Elena Rodriguez frowned at the results on her tablet. She hurried down the corridor, nearly colliding with Douglas as he exited Wren's lab. "Dr. Morgan," she said, her voice tight with urgency, "we need to perform a full medical examination on Wren immediately. Her hormone levels are off the charts." Douglas glanced back at the lab door. "She's been reluctant to undergo any invasive procedures. What exactly are we looking at?" Dr. Rodriguez lowered her voice. "I'm not sure, but these readings suggest massive changes in her reproductive system. It could be life-threatening." As they spoke, Wren sat alone in the lab, her fingers flying over a keyboard. She had hacked into the facility's database, her eyes darting across screens filled with human medical information. With each passing minute, her understanding of human biology deepened, along with her purpose to unlock its secrets for her people. A notification popped up on her screen. UN Security Council emergency session in progress. Wren's antennae twitched with interest as she accessed the live feed. On the screen, delegates from various nations argued heatedly. The Chinese representative leaned forward, his voice firm. "We must use this opportunity to negotiate for advanced technology. The Kazan clearly possess knowledge beyond our own." The Russian delegate scoffed. "And risk giving them the means to outbreed us? We should withhold all reproductive information to maintain our advantage." Wren's heart raced as she absorbed the implications of their words. She closed the feed, her determination strengthening. If the humans wouldn't freely share their knowledge, she would take matters into her own hands. In a dimly lit room across the facility, Douglas conferred with Dr. James Peterson, his voice low and urgent. "James, I think something's happening to Wren. Her physical changes are accelerating, and she's been acting strange." Dr. Peterson stroked his beard thoughtfully. "What kind of changes are we talking about?" "Abdominal swelling, mood swings, and according to Dr. Rodriguez, her hormone levels are off the charts," Douglas replied. "Fascinating," Dr. Peterson murmured. "It sounds like her body is adapting to Earth's environment in ways we never anticipated. We could be witnessing an unprecedented biological event." As they spoke, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed in the corridors as a voice boomed over the intercom. "Security breach! All personnel evacuate immediately!" Douglas's eyes widened in horror. "Wren," he breathed before sprinting towards her lab. Outside, Hawkins gave the signal. "Team Alpha, move in now!" Chaos erupted as masked figures in tactical gear stormed the facility. Scientists and security personnel scrambled in all directions, the air thick with shouts and the acrid smell of smoke grenades. In her lab, Wren clutched her swollen abdomen, pain racking her body. She could hear the commotion outside, but her focus remained on the miracle happening within her. She felt a strange sensation, as if something was about to burst forth. Douglas reached the lab door, panting heavily. He punched in the access code with trembling fingers, his heart pounding in his ears. As the door slid open, he was greeted by a sight that defied all scientific understanding. Wren stood in the center of the room, her body glowing with an otherworldly light. Her abdomen pulsed and writhed, as if alive with countless tiny beings. She turned to Douglas, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and wonder. "Douglas," she whispered, her voice strained, I think I'm about to give birth to hundreds." The facility shook with the sound of explosions. The Earth First Coalition was closing in, unaware of the extraordinary event unfolding within. As Douglas stared in awe at Wren's transforming body, he realized that the next few moments would change the course of human and Kazan history forever. As Douglas stared in awe at Wren's transforming body, the facility shook with another explosion. The alien's eyes rolled back, and she collapsed to the floor, her abdomen pulsating with an otherworldly rhythm. "Wren!" Douglas cried, rushing to her side. He pressed his fingers to her neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, but erratic and weak. The lab door burst open, and Dr. Elena Rodriguez rushed in, her face pale with shock. "Dr. Morgan, we need to move her now. The situation is critical." Together they lifted Wren onto a gurney and wheeled her out of the lab. The corridors were a maze of flashing red lights and blaring alarms. Scientists and security personnel ran past them, their faces etched with panic. "Where are we taking her?" Douglas shouted over the cacophony. "Quarantine chamber," Dr. Rodriguez replied, her voice strained as they pushed the gurney. "We need to contain whatever's happening to her body." They reached the quarantine area and sealed Wren inside a sterile chamber. Through the transparent walls, Douglas watched in horror as Wren's abdomen swelled even further, her skin stretching to its limits. Dr. Rodriguez's fingers flew over a control panel, activating various scanners and monitors. "My God," she whispered, her eyes widening as data flooded the screens. "She's producing hundreds of eggs per hour. This is unprecedented." Douglas leaned closer to the chamber, pressing his hand against the cool surface. "Wren, can you hear me? We're going to help you." The alien's eyes fluttered open, filled with pain and confusion. "Douglas," she croaked, her voice barely audible through the intercom. "What's happening to me?" Before he could answer, General Marcus Blackwell's voice crackled over the facility's speakers. "Attention all personnel. We have a code red situation. Hostile forces have breached the perimeter. Initiate lockdown procedures immediately." Dr. Rodriguez cursed under her breath. "We need to stabilize her condition before we can move her to a more secure location." As they worked frantically to monitor Wren's vital signs and administer emergency treatments, the sounds of combat grew closer. Gunshots echoed through the corridors, punctuated by shouts and the thud of booted feet. Suddenly, the quarantine chamber's door slid open, and Dr. James Peterson burst in, clutching a tablet. "Douglas, Elena, you need to see this," he panted, his eyes wild with excitement and fear. He thrust the tablet into their hands, displaying a complex array of molecular diagrams. "It's a common Earth bacteria," he explained breathlessly. "Something in Wren's biology reacted to it, triggering this hyperfertility response." Douglas's mind raced with the implications. "This could be the key to solving the Kazon's fertility crisis," he murmured. A loud explosion rocked the facility, much closer this time. The lights flickered, and for a moment, the only illumination came from the soft glow of Wren's bioluminescent skin. "We're out of time," Dr. Rodriguez said, her voice tight with urgency. "We need to move her to the underground bunker now." As they prepared to transport Wren, her body suddenly went rigid. Her back arched off the gurney, and a keening wail escaped her lips. The monitors surrounding her bed erupted in a chorus of alarms. "She's going into shock," Dr. Rodriguez shouted. "We need to stabilize her before we move her, or we'll lose her." Douglas grabbed a nearby crash cart, his hands shaking as he prepared emergency medications. "Hang on, Wren," he pleaded. "Just hang on." The door to the quarantine area burst open, revealing a group of armed men in tactical gear. At their head stood Jack Hawkins, his eyes blazing with fanatical tenacity. "Step away from the alien," Hawkins growled, raising his weapon. Douglas positioned himself between the intruders and Wren's prone form. "You don't understand what's happening here," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "This could be the key to interstellar peace." Hawkins sneered. "Peace? That thing is a threat to our very existence. We're here to eliminate it before it can breed and overrun our planet." As the standoff intensified, Wren's body began to emit a strange, pulsating light. The eggs within her abdomen seemed to be reaching a critical mass, ready to burst forth at any moment. In the command center, General Blackwell watched the chaos unfold on multiple screens. His finger hovered over a red button labeled Operation Stardust. With a heavy heart, he realized he might have no choice but to contain the situation by any means necessary, even if it meant sacrificing everyone in the facility. Back in the quarantine chamber, Douglas's mind raced, searching for a solution that would save Wren, protect Earth, and prevent an interstellar incident. The next few moments would determine the fate of two species, and the weight of that responsibility pressed down on him like a physical force. As Hawkins took another step forward, his finger tightening on the trigger, Wren's eyes snapped open. She locked gazes with Douglas, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Whatever happened next would change the course of history forever. As Wren's eyes locked with Douglas's, a silent understanding passed between them. In that moment, the alien's body convulsed violently, her skin pulsating with an otherworldly glow. Douglas sprang into action, his scientific training kicking in despite the chaos surrounding them. "We need to move her now," he shouted to Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Peterson. "The bunker is our only chance." With practiced efficiency, they secured Wren to the gurney and began wheeling her towards the exit. Hawkins and his men, momentarily stunned by the alien's sudden transformation, hesitated just long enough for Douglas and his team to slip past them. "After them!" Hawkins roared, snapping out of his daze. The sound of heavy boots echoed through the corridor as the Earth First Coalition gave chase. The facility had become a war zone. Alarms blared, emergency lights cast eerie red shadows, and the acrid smell of smoke filled the air. Douglas and his team navigated the maze-like hallways, their path illuminated by the soft bioluminescence emanating from Wren's skin. As they neared the entrance to the underground bunker, a group of security personnel engaged Hawkins's forces in a fierce firefight. The air crackled with gunfire and the sharp tang of cordite. "Keep moving," Dr. Rodriguez yelled over the din. "We're almost there." They reached the bunker's entrance, a massive steel door built to withstand almost any assault. Douglas punched in his access code with trembling fingers, glancing nervously over his shoulder as the sounds of combat grew closer. With a hiss of hydraulics, the door slid open. They rushed inside, the heavy barrier sealing shut behind them with a resounding clang. The noise from above was instantly muffled, replaced by the low hum of advanced life support systems. "Get her to the medical bay," Douglas instructed, his voice tight with urgency. They wheeled Wren down the sterile corridor, the alien's condition deteriorating with each passing second. In the state-of-the-art medical bay, Dr. Rodriguez immediately began hooking Wren up to an array of monitors and life support equipment. The screens came to life, displaying a dizzying array of data that painted a shocking picture of the alien's rapidly changing physiology. "My God," Dr. Rodriguez breathed, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Her reproductive system is in overdrive. She's producing thousands of eggs per hour, and the rate is still accelerating." Douglas leaned in, studying the readouts with growing concern. "Can we stabilize her condition?" Dr. Rodriguez shook her head, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm trying, but her biology is changing so rapidly that our treatments are becoming obsolete almost as soon as we administer them." As they worked feverishly to keep Wren alive, Dr. Peterson burst into the room, clutching his tablet. "I've made a breakthrough," he announced, his voice a mix of excitement and trepidation. "It's a common Earth bacteria, Bacillus terrestris. Something in Wren's biology reacted to it, triggering this hyperfertility response." Douglas's mind raced with the implications. "This could be the key to solving the Kazan's fertility crisis," he murmured, hope and dread warring within him. Before they could discuss further, the bunker's security system blared to life. A holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing the Earth First Coalition forces breaching the facility's final defensive line. "They're getting closer," Dr. Rodriguez said, her voice tight with fear. "What do we do?" Douglas's teeth clenched. He strode to a control panel and began inputting a series of complex commands. "We activate the bunker's defense protocols," he explained as robotic sentries emerged from hidden compartments in the walls. "These will buy us some time." As the sounds of distant gunfire echoed through the bunker, Douglas initiated a data transfer, sending all their research findings to a secure off-site server. "We can't risk losing this information," he explained to his colleagues. Suddenly, Wren's eyes snapped open, her gaze clear and alert despite her body's ongoing transformation. To everyone's shock, she spoke in perfect English, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. "Douglas," she said, her words precise and measured, "my species possesses a dormant ability for rapid adaptation. Your planet's environment has awakened it within me. The scientists exchanged stunned glances as Wren continued, her voice growing stronger. My body is evolving to survive in your world, but the process is unstable. The eggs, they're not just multiplying, they're changing. As if on cue, the monitors tracking Wren's condition lit up with new alerts. Dr. Rodriguez gasped, pointing to a series of rapidly changing readouts. The eggs, some of them are hatching. They watched in awe as tiny forms began to emerge from several of the eggs. The newborn Kazan infants were unlike anything they had ever seen, displaying a mix of alien and human characteristics. Incredible, Dr. Peterson breathed, leaning in for a closer look. They've inherited traits from both species. This could rewrite everything we know about interspecies reproduction. The moment of scientific wonder was shattered by a massive explosion that rocked the bunker. The security display showed Jack Hawkins and his men breaching the outer defenses, armed with stolen experimental weapons designed to target alien biology. As alarms blared throughout the bunker, a new alert flashed on the main screen. Douglas's eyes widened as he read the message. A Kazon ship has been detected, he announced, his voice tight with tension. They're on a direct course for Earth. Estimated arrival time, less than 48 hours. The weight of the situation pressed down on Douglas like a physical force. He looked from Wren's rapidly evolving form to the newborn Kazon human hybrids, then to the security feed showing Hawkins's approaching forces. Outside the bunker, General Blackwell was undoubtedly preparing to contain the situation by any means necessary, possibly including an EMP that would trap them all underground. With time running out and the fate of two species hanging in the balance, Douglas knew that his next decisions would shape the course of human and Kazan history. The bunker, once a bastion of security, now felt like the eye of a storm that threatened to engulf them all. As the sixth day dawned, the underground bunker that had once been a haven of security now pulsed with an otherworldly energy. Douglas wiped sweat from his brow, his eyes darting between the numerous monitors surrounding Wren's bed. The alien's body continued to evolve at an alarming rate, her skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to shift and change with each passing moment. Dr. Rodriguez approached, her face etched with exhaustion and wonder. Douglas, you need to see this, she said, gesturing to a nearby incubator. Inside, dozens of tiny forms wriggled and squirmed, their skin a mottled mix of human and Kazan features. As they watched, one of the hybrid infants opened its eyes, revealing irises that swirled with an iridescent glow. The child blinked, and suddenly a nearby medical tray levitated off the ground, suspended in midair. Telekinesis, Dr. Peterson breathed, his eyes wide. They're developing abilities we never thought possible. A sudden tremor shook the bunker, causing the lights to flicker. The security feed crackled to life, revealing Jack Hawkins and his Earth First Coalition forces outside, wielding a massive device that emitted a sickly green beam. The beam cut through the bunker's reinforced door with minimal resistance. They've breached the outer defenses, Douglas said, his voice tight. We're running out of time. As if in response to the mounting tension, Wren's body convulsed. A wave of energy pulsed from her form, washing over the humans in the room. Douglas gasped as a surge of clarity swept through his mind, his senses suddenly heightened to an almost painful degree. What's happening to us? Dr. Rodriguez asked, her voice trembling as she flexed her fingers, marveling at her newfound strength. Before Douglas could respond, an alert blared from the communications console. A holographic display flickered to life, showing a massive Kazan ship entering Earth's orbit. The ship's intimidating form loomed large, its weapon systems primed and ready. A deep, resonant voice filled the bunker. This is Commander Zorn of the Kazan Imperium. Return Wren and her offspring immediately, or face the consequences of your actions. The threat hung in the air, punctuated by another explosion from above. The bunker's life support systems fluctuated, causing the temperature to drop drastically. We need to stabilize the environment, Dr. Peterson shouted, rushing to a nearby control panel. As he worked, his movements became a blur of superhuman speed, his mind processing complex calculations faster than ever before. In the medical bay, the hybrid children continued to grow at an astonishing rate. What had been infants mere hours ago now resembled young adults, their eyes glowing with an inner light that spoke of vast intelligence and untapped potential. One of the hybrids, a female with striking features that blended human and Kazan characteristics, approached a computer terminal. Her hand hovered over the interface, and suddenly streams of data began to flow across the screen. "They're accessing our systems," Douglas realized with a start. "We need to contain them before—" His words were cut short as the hybrid turned to face him, her eyes pulsing with an otherworldly light. "We seek understanding," she said, her voice a melodic blend of human and alien tones. "Your world holds the key to our survival, just as we hold the key to yours." A violent tremor shook the bunker, more severe than before. The security feed showed Major Sarah Hicks and her Special Forces team engaging Hawkins's forces in a fierce firefight. Energy weapons flashed, illuminating the chaos unfolding above ground. Amidst the mayhem, Wren's body began to emit a low, pulsating hum. The air around her shimmered, distorting like a heat mirage. Douglas watched in awe as every electronic device in the vicinity began to malfunction, screens flickering with random patterns of static. "Her electromagnetic field is expanding," Dr. Rodriguez shouted over the growing din. "If it continues to grow at this rate, it could disable everything within a 50-mile radius." Douglas's mind raced, trying to process the rapidly escalating situation. The hybrid children were evolving beyond their control, potentially transmitting sensitive data to the Kazan ship. Hawkins and his forces were moments away from breaching the inner sanctum. The Kazan commander's ultimatum loomed over them all, threatening global conflict. And at the center of it all was Wren, her body undergoing a transformation that defied all scientific understanding. As Douglas watched, her eyes snapped open, glowing with an inner fire that seemed to peer into the very fabric of reality. "Douglas," Wren's voice echoed in his mind, bypassing his ears entirely. "The convergence approaches. The fate of both our species hangs in the balance. We must act now." The bunker trembled once more, dust raining down from the ceiling. The sound of Hawkins's weapon grew louder, the final barrier between them and the Earth First Coalition beginning to give way. Douglas steeled himself, knowing that his next decisions would shape the course of human and Kazan history. With Wren's cryptic warning echoing in his mind, he turned to face the challenges that lay ahead, acutely aware that the next 24 hours would determine the future of two worlds. Species. As the words left Douglas's mouth, the bunker shuddered violently, and the air crackled with an otherworldly energy. The seventh day dawned, but within the underground facility, time seemed to lose all meaning. Wren's electromagnetic field expanded rapidly, causing every electronic device in the vicinity to spark and fizzle. Monitors flickered and died, plunging sections of the bunker into darkness. Dr. Rodriguez stumbled as another tremor shook the facility. "Douglas," she called out, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms and failing equipment. "The field is growing exponentially. We're losing control." Douglas gritted his teeth, his mind racing through potential solutions. He sprinted to a reinforced cabinet in the corner of the room, fumbling with the manual lock. Inside lay their last resort, an experimental containment device designed to neutralize exotic energy signatures. "Help me with this," he shouted to Dr. Peterson, who rushed to his side. Together they hefted the bulky apparatus and began calibrating it. As they worked, the hybrid offspring, now numbering in the hundreds, began to stir. Their eyes glowed with an eerie intelligence, and their movements became more purposeful. One of them, a tall female with iridescent skin, approached a locked door. She placed her hand on the metal surface, and before their eyes, the door began to melt and reform, creating an opening. "My God," Dr. Peterson whispered, momentarily distracted from his task. "They're manipulating matter at a molecular level." Douglas snapped his fingers in front of the scientist's face. "Focus! We need to activate this now, or we'll lose everything." With a final twist of a dial, the containment device hummed to life. A shimmering field of energy expanded outward, enveloping Wren and the hybrids. The effect was immediate. Wren's electromagnetic emissions diminished, and the failing electronics stabilized. For a moment, relief washed over Douglas, but the respite was short-lived. Douglas, Dr. Rodriguez called out, her eyes wide with shock. Look at the hybrids. The containment field, designed to dampen exotic energy, had an unexpected effect on the Kazan human offspring. Their growth, already accelerated, now kicked into overdrive. Limbs elongated, features sharpened, and their eyes blazed with newfound power. Before anyone could react, a deafening roar filled the air. The bunker's reinforced ceiling groaned under an immense pressure. Dust and debris rained down as a massive shape blotted out the emergency lights. Kazan ship, Douglas breathed, recognizing the distinctive outline of the alien vessel. They've entered the atmosphere. Outside, chaos reigned. Earth's defense systems, rendered useless by Wren's electromagnetic pulse, stood idle as Commander Zorn's ship descended. Military personnel scrambled to respond, their communications reduced to handheld radios and manual signals. In the command center of Earth's Unified Defense Force, General Blackwell barked orders, his face a mask of awe-inspiring fury. I want every available missile locked on that ship. If they so much as twitch, I want them blown out of the sky. Back in the bunker, Dr. Rodriguez hunched over a hastily assembled analog microscope, her hands shaking with a mix of exhaustion and excitement. Douglas, you need to see this, she called out. He joined her at the workstation, peering into the eyepiece. What he saw defied belief. The Bacillus terrestris bacteria, mutated by its interaction with Kazan DNA, had created something entirely new. It's not just adaptation, Dr. Rodriguez explained, her voice filled with awe. These hybrids can literally rewrite their genetic code on the fly. They could survive in any environment, adapt to any threat. The implications hit Douglas like a physical blow. This discovery could solve the Kazan fertility crisis, potentially averting an interstellar war. But if it escaped containment, it could rewrite Earth's entire ecosystem. Before he could fully process this information, the bunker rocked with a massive explosion. Alarms blared, and the security feed flickered to life, showing Jack Hawkins and his Earth First Coalition forces pouring through a breach in the outer defenses. They're inside, Dr. Peterson shouted, panic evident in his voice. Douglas watched in horror as Hawkins hefted a cylindrical device, its surface covered in biohazard warnings. They're going to release a biological weapon, he realized aloud. The hybrid offspring reacted with startling speed. As the Earth First Coalition forces advanced, the hybrid's eyes began to glow with an intense light. The air around them shimmered, and suddenly, the biological weapon in Hawkins's hands disintegrated into harmless particles. But the hybrid's defensive action had unintended consequences. The energy they released coalesced into a swirling vortex of light and matter, a wormhole right in the heart of the bunker. Impossible, Dr. Peterson muttered, staring at the physics-defying phenomenon. The wormhole's pull intensified, drawing in loose objects and threatening to tear the facility apart. Douglas grabbed onto a support beam, his mind racing to find a solution. Suddenly, Wren's eyes snapped open. She sat up, her movements fluid despite the chaos around her. When she spoke, her voice resonated not in the air, but directly in their minds. Children, she called out telepathically, focus your energy, stabilize the tear. The hybrid offspring responded instantly, their combined powers creating a shimmering barrier around the wormhole. The pull lessened, but the dimensional rift remained. In that moment of relative calm, a new voice boomed through the facility, deep, authoritative, and unmistakably alien. This is Admiral Vrix of the Kazan Imperium, the voice declared. Surrender Wren and her offspring immediately, or we will have no choice but to eliminate the threat your planet poses to our species. Douglas's heart sank. He looked from Wren to the hybrids, to the wormhole they were barely containing, and finally to the screens showing two Kazan ships now hovering above the facility. The enormity of the situation crashed down upon him. He had mere hours, perhaps less, to prevent an interstellar war, contain a potentially ecosystem-altering bacteria, and close a wormhole that defied the laws of physics. And somehow, in the midst of all this, he had to find a way to communicate with the Kazan, to show them that cooperation, not conflict, was the answer. As he steeled himself for the challenges ahead, Douglas couldn't shake the feeling that the next few hours would determine not just his fate, but the fate of two entire species. The clock was ticking, and the real test of his abilities was about to begin. Douglas took a deep breath, his mind racing with possibilities. The chaos surrounding him faded into the background as a plan began to form. "General Blackwell," he said into his communicator, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We need to establish direct contact with the Kazon ships. It's our only chance to prevent this from escalating further." There was a moment of tense silence before the general's gruff voice crackled through. "Understood. Make it happen, Douglas. We're counting on you." With the green light given, Douglas turned to Dr. Peterson. "We need to cobble together a transmitter, something powerful enough to reach those ships." The two men worked feverishly, salvaging parts from the damaged equipment around them. Their hands moved with practiced precision, connecting wires and calibrating frequencies. After what felt like an eternity but was merely minutes, a makeshift transmitter hummed to life. Douglas adjusted the settings, his heart pounding as he broadcast on an open channel. "This is Douglas Carter of Earth. Commander Zorn, Admiral Vrix, please respond. We have a proposal that could benefit both our species." Static filled the air, punctuated by bursts of alien language. Then a familiar voice emerged. "This is Commander Zorn. Speak quickly, human. Our patience wears thin." Douglas outlined his proposal, his words measured and clear. "We believe we've found a solution to your fertility crisis. A modified strain of Earth bacteria, Bacillus terrestris, has shown remarkable adaptive properties when combined with Kazon DNA. We propose a controlled introduction to a small group of Kazon volunteers." There was a long pause, filled only by the low hum of the wormhole in the labored breathing of Wren and her offspring as they struggled to contain it. Finally, Admiral Vrix's deep voice resonated through the transmitter. "You propose to use our own people as test subjects? How can we trust that this is not a ploy?" "We understand your skepticism," Douglas replied. "That's why we're asking for a 24-hour ceasefire. Allow us to demonstrate the bacteria's effects. If we're right, it could be the key to saving your species." The silence that followed was deafening. Douglas could almost feel the weight of two civilizations hanging in the balance. Then Commander Zorn spoke. "We agree to your terms. 24 hours, no more. I will personally volunteer for this experiment." As the transmission ended, Douglas turned to see Wren's form flickering like a faulty hologram, shifting between her Kazon appearance and something more human. The hybrid offspring surrounded her, their combined efforts visibly straining as they fought to contain the wormhole. Dr. Rodriguez approached, her eyes wide with a mix of exhaustion and excitement. "Douglas, I've been analyzing the data from Wren's transformations. I think the hybrids might be able to control their rapid aging. If we can develop a treatment to stabilize their growth, we could prevent them from burning out too quickly." Before Douglas could respond, Major Hicks burst into the room, her uniform singed and torn. "We've neutralized the Earth First Coalition forces," she reported. "Hawkins is in custody, but he's badly wounded. During interrogation, he revealed something disturbing. The Coalition has sleeper agents in key government positions worldwide." Douglas's mind reeled at the implications. He grabbed his communicator once more. "General Blackwell, we have a security breach. Initiate global protocols immediately. We can't risk any sabotage to these negotiations." As Blackwell acknowledged the order, Dr. Peterson approached with a sealed container. "The modified Bacillus terrestris is ready for the demonstration. We've prepared a quarantine area for the Kazon volunteers." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity. Douglas coordinated with the United Nations as they convened an emergency session to discuss the implications of sharing the fertility treatment. Dr. Rodriguez worked tirelessly on a stabilization treatment for the hybrids, who were showing signs of slowing their rapid aging. Meanwhile, Commander Zorn and a small group of Kazon volunteers arrived at the facility, their faces a mix of hope and suspicion as they were led to the quarantine area. Dr. Peterson administered the treatment with steady hands, his voice calm as he explained each step of the process. As the treatment progressed, Douglas found himself drawn back to the wormhole. He watched as Wren and her offspring maintained their telekinetic hold on the anomaly, their faces etched with concentration. An idea began to form in his mind. Ren, he said softly, approaching the shimmering barrier. Is it possible that we could use this wormhole to our advantage, as a means of safely transporting the hybrids to a neutral location? Ren's eyes, glowing with otherworldly energy, met his. It may be possible, she replied, her voice echoing in his mind. But it would require precise control. One miscalculation could have catastrophic consequences. As they discussed the possibilities, Douglas's communicator chirped. Admiral Vrix's voice came through, uncharacteristically subdued. Mr. Carter, I wish to discuss something privately. Your people have shown unexpected potential. Perhaps there is more to be gained here than we initially thought. Douglas listened intently as the Admiral outlined the possibility of long-term cooperation between their species. The exchange of scientific knowledge and resources could benefit both worlds in ways they had yet to imagine. As the 24-hour deadline approached, tension mounted in the facility. The success or failure of the fertility treatment would determine the course of human-Kazan relations. Douglas paced the room, his eyes darting between the quarantine area and the contained wormhole. Suddenly, one of the Kazan volunteers let out a startled cry. All eyes turned to the quarantine zone as the first visible signs of the treatment began to manifest. Douglas held his breath, acutely aware that the next few moments could change the course of two civilizations forever. The room fell silent as they waited to see if this breakthrough would lead to a new era of interstellar cooperation or plunge them into a devastating conflict. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and the clock was ticking. Ticking. The air in the room was thick with tension as all eyes focused on the quarantine zone. The Kazan volunteer's startled cry was followed by a moment of stunned silence. Then a flurry of activity erupted as Dr. Peterson rushed to examine the alien's vital signs. His hands moved swiftly over various instruments, his eyes darting between readouts and the Kazan's changing physiology. Incredible, Dr. Peterson breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. The cellular regeneration rate is off the charts. Commander Zorn, how do you feel? The Kazan commander stood straighter, his eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and hope. I feel alive, more than I have in decades. Dr. Rodriguez quickly analyzed the data streaming across her tablet. Douglas, look at this, she said, her voice trembling with excitement. Commander Zorn's fertility markers have increased by 300% in just a matter of hours. The modified Bacillus terrestris is working even better than we hypothesized. Douglas's heart raced as he processed the implications. He turned to the communication terminal, his fingers flying over the controls. Admiral Vrix, are you seeing this data? The Admiral's deep voice resonated through the speakers, a note of awe evident even through the alien inflections. We are, Mr. Carter. This changes everything. As the gravity of the moment settled over the room, a commotion near the contained wormhole drew Douglas's attention. Ren's form had stabilized, her body no longer flickering between human and Kazan appearances. She stood tall, her eyes glowing with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the shimmering barrier around the wormhole. Douglas, she called out, her voice resonating directly in his mind. Something is happening. I can feel life, multiple lives growing within me. Dr. Rodriguez rushed to Ren's side, medical scanner in hand. Her eyes widened as she interpreted the results. This is unprecedented, she gasped. Ren is pregnant with 32 embryos, each at a different stage of development. It's as if her accelerated biology is manifesting multiple pregnancies simultaneously. The implications of this development raced through Douglas's mind. He looked from Ren to the successful Kazan volunteers, to the contained wormhole, and finally to the screens showing the Kazan ships hovering above. In that moment, a daring plan began to form. Dr. Peterson, Dr. Rodriguez, he called out, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. I need you to compile all the data we have on the hybrid biology and the modified bacteria. We're going to make a proposal to both Earth and the Kazan. As the scientists worked, Douglas opened a secure channel to General Blackwell and the United Nations Security Council. We have a situation here that could revolutionize interstellar relations, he began. I'm proposing we use the contained wormhole to transport Ren and a select group of hybrid offspring to a nearby uninhabited planet. We'll call it Genesis. It will serve as neutral ground for both species to study the long-term effects of the hybrid biology in the modified bacteria. The response was immediate and heated. Voices overlapped as world leaders debated the merits and risks of such a bold move. After what felt like hours but was merely minutes, a consensus was reached. "We agree to your proposal, Mr. Carter," the UN Secretary-General announced, her voice firm. "But on one condition, Earth must maintain a permanent scientific presence on Genesis." With Earth's agreement secured, Douglas turned his attention to the Kazan. He outlined the proposal to Admiral Vrix, emphasizing the potential benefits for both species. The Admiral's response was swift. "Your offer is intriguing, Mr. Carter. The Kazan High Command agrees to these terms. We are eager to secure this fertility treatment for our people." As preparations for the transport began, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Major Hicks's voice crackled over the intercom. "Security breach! Hawkins has escaped custody and is heading for the main lab." Douglas's blood ran cold. He turned to see Jack Hawkins burst through the door, a makeshift explosive device in his hands. "You'll doom us all," Hawkins shouted, his eyes wild as he lunged toward the wormhole containment field. In that moment, time seemed to slow. The hybrid offspring reacted with startling speed, their eyes glowing with concentrated energy. As Hawkins's device neared the containment field, it disintegrated into harmless particles. Major Hicks and her team swarmed into the room, quickly subduing Hawkins. As they dragged him away, Douglas locked eyes with Wren. An unspoken understanding passed between them. "It's time," Wren said, her voice echoing in the minds of all present. Douglas nodded, his fingers flying over the control panel. "Initiating wormhole transport sequence," he announced. Wren, along with 100 of the most stable hybrid offspring, approached the shimmering portal. She turned back one last time, her eyes meeting Douglas's. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude and hope. "For everything." With that, Wren and the hybrids stepped through the wormhole. The air crackled with energy as the portal began to close behind them. Douglas watched, his heart pounding, as the last ripple of the wormhole faded away. The room fell silent for a moment before erupting into a flurry of activity. Dr. Rodriguez immediately began organizing treatment programs for the remaining hybrids, while Dr. Peterson compiled data to be sent to the Genesis team. As Douglas coordinated communications between Earth and the Kazan ships, a message came through from Admiral Vrix. "Mr. Carter, I will be landing on Earth shortly to sign the treaty. It seems we have much to discuss about our future together." Douglas took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. He looked around the room at the scientists, soldiers, and hybrids working together. In just a few short days, the course of human history had been irrevocably altered. As he prepared to greet Admiral Vrix and usher in a new era of interstellar cooperation, Douglas couldn't help but wonder what challenges and discoveries lay ahead on Genesis. The journey was far from finished, but for the first time since Wren crash-landed on Earth, he felt a genuine sense of hope for the future.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.